Okay then, so if we move on to the agreement itself. The agreement at Bretton Woods produced two institutions ultimately. The International Monetary Fund and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, or what we would later know and now know as the World Bank. So the IMF first. The IMF was to be a mechanism for to help countries with temporary balance of payments problems. Each member was to have a quota. It was to lodge a certain amount of foreign exchange with the IMF in proportion to that quota, which was to be linked to its to the size of its GDP. The IMF was to be able to help to loan countries an amount of quota to assist them with balance of payments problems, and it was also to have a surveillance role, reporting regularly on balance of payments deficits. It was to be what you also see in addition to the institutions. You also often hear the phrase the Bretton Woods system, and that the Bretton Woods system refers to the idea that all currencies are to be fixed in their exchange values in relation to each other, and in particular their value in relation to the US dollar, and the US dollar was to be to underwrite the whole international trading system, and was to be ultimately convertible to gold. So over the period in the early 1970s, the idea was that if you had US dollars, you could take them to Fort Knox in the United States and say, I want to exchange these dollars for my bit of gold, and the US government was supposed to promise you that in that event they would go down to the vaults and chop a bit of gold off and give you your dollar value of gold, which was something like $35 an ounce was the exchange rate system. And what that was all about was providing confidence and stability in the international trading system, and a mechanism to resolve balance of payments deficits without necessarily forcing countries to change or adjust in the short term the domestic prices. And so what that was about was avoiding the global economy changes in the global economy resulting in pressures for unemployment within states. The second organisation, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, was very much about what Keynes had wanted out of the IMF in terms of the adjustment of creditor and debtor states. And so what the IBRD was about doing was through a different mechanism, through effectively development grants and loans, was to provide loans to the value of its own capital stock, which would be provided by members principally in the post-war the United States, and it was to provide loans principally to European countries that were devastated by the war, and those loans would be a mechanism by which the United States could recycle dollars back into the global system, and from its point of view would be used to buy through imports US goods that would be traded on the world market. But it's very much important that very important that you get the sense that the World Bank initially was about providing a mechanism for recycling dollars and for reconstructing Western Europe after the war. So how do we explain Bretton Woods? Well, first of all, a general explanation is that this was very much a system which was about controlling international finance, putting states in charge of international financial flows, and not just any states, principally the United States government. It was about promoting free trade. It was about providing a mechanism for states to cooperate internationally in managing the global economy. It was to bind states together to avoid states backing out of their commitments to one another, and it was about protecting the domestic economy from adjustment to global financial and trading pressures. Secondly then, how do we understand Bretton Woods from the perspective of the battle of ideas about how the relationship between state and market ought to be constructed? Well, what Bretton Woods reflects really is the international outgrowth of a social democratic model of the US variant of the social democratic model. So it was about institutionalizing US power in the post-war world and about promoting the particular version of capitalist social democracy that the United States wanted to see across the rest of the world. Now that's the social democratic way of understanding Bretton Woods, but what you might also do, also reflect upon, is the critique offered by the other two main positions in that battle of ideas. So the socialist position would broadly see Bretton Woods as a mechanism to broker consent internationally to capitalism, while overcoming some of the problems of capitalist competition between states and providing a peaceful mechanism for those to be resolved. And then, as a counter to that, the free market position would see Bretton Woods and the domestic welfare compromise associated with the post-war period with state capture of the economy and the expression of the self-interest of particular groups that have managed to capture the state apparatus. But a number of other authors also offer perspectives that entwine with these ideas about state and market. So Eikenberry sees the negotiation of Bretton Woods as particularly as being reflecting an opportune moment for experts to have, like Keynes and Harry Dexter White, to have an unusual amount of autonomy to negotiate international agreements, what Eikenberry calls a regime, and they had that autonomy because of the post-war context and the distractions because of the wartime context and the distractions that generated for politicians. David Reynolds, whose series on Radio 4 and partly on the television you'll have seen recently on a sort of epic history of the United States, he characterises this relationship during the war and post-war economic planning between the US and the UK as being one competitive cooperation. So they both had a set of ultimate strategic goals, but within the framework of cooperation to achieve those were very much so each other as competitors, and that process was largely played out or influenced and shaped by the asymmetry and power relations between the two states. Schild then sees post-war economic planning as inseparable from post-war security concerns, and in particular concerns over the relationship with the Soviet Union, which during the war was obviously the other wartime ally. But after the war, obviously the world broke down into two ideas really about how about that state and that relationship between state and market, a battle between the social democratic alternative on one hand and the socialist alternative on the other. And then Gardner really reflects on the general economic necessity of providing an institutional framework for post-war economic planning.